Hello, I'm Aisha Fabian and welcome to Your World. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll take you through some of the biggest stories making waves around the globe this week. So let's start Your World. For the first segment in this week's Your World, there are two major events that are making headlines around the world this week. In South Korea, newly released video reveals final moments before the Jeju Air Flight 2216 crash, offering important clues in the ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, in Myanmar, a powerful earthquake caused widespread damage in the historic city of Inwa, affecting both lives and cultural heritages.
The snap election in South Korea is scheduled for June the 3rd, and Election Day will be designated a temporary public holiday. Candidate registration is set for May the 10th and 11th, with the official campaign period running from May the 12th to June 2nd. Early voting will take place on May the 29th and 30th. These key dates have been announced as part of the country's preparations to ensure a smooth electoral process. The National Election Commission, or NEC, has started groundwork to guarantee transparency and fairness. More than 19 million people in Yemen are still in need of basic assistance such as food, nutrition, healthcare, shelter, and clean water. Nearly half of the population is suffering from acute hunger, and many lack access to safe drinking water. Women and children are the most affected by the ongoing crisis, while humanitarian operations are increasingly strained due to limited funding and operational challenges. In a press briefing on April the 7th, UN Secretary-General spokesperson Stefan Dujarric stated that this year's humanitarian appeal for Yemen amounts to $2.5 billion, but less than 7%, around $173 million, has been received so far. A 7.9 magnitude earthquake that struck Myanmar on March 28 devastated the former royal capital of Inwa, also known as Ava, reducing most of its centuries-old buildings to rubble. Once a thriving city from the 14th to the 19th century and home to 961 historic structures and pagodas, Inwa had been prepared for nomination to the UNESCO World Heritage List. The destruction left local residents heartbroken, as the town's rich heritage could no longer be showcased to visitors. According to official media, widespread damage was reported across the country as a result of the earthquake. The death toll was reported at 3,354 and 4,508 people injured and 220 still missing, as confirmed by Myanmar radio and television. KBS has released a video showing the final 2 minutes and 40 seconds of the Jeju Air Flight 2216 crash, which killed 179 people. The black box stopped recording 4 minutes before the crash, making the footage crucial. The video starts shortly after a Mayday call showing the plane circling near Muan Airport when flames and smoke erupt from the right engine. An explosion follows, and the aircraft begins to shake and descend. The plane briefly regains altitude but tilts sharply to the right. The aircraft crashes shortly after, with the video capturing the final moments missed by the black box. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres stressed humanitarian workers in Gaza are under attack yet remain committed to helping those in need. He noted that no aid has entered Gaza for over a month and urged for a permanent ceasefire, full humanitarian access, and the release of all hostages. The collapse of the ceasefire has deepened the suffering of Palestinian families and hostage families in Israel. Guterres warned that Israel's proposed aid controls risks severely limiting humanitarian relief and stated the UN will not support any plan that violates humanitarian principles. The first iteration of this year's COPE Thunder exercise officially began on April the 7th at Clark Air Base in Pampanga. Running until April the 18th, the bilateral exercise involves 729 airmen from the Philippine Air Force or PAF and 250 from the U.S. Pacific Air Forces or PACAF. The training will focus on air-to-air combat, including dogfighting and tactical intercepts. This year's exercise aims to improve asymmetric warfare tactics, air superiority, operational readiness, and strategic deterrence. It follows the recent U.S. approval of a potential $5.58 billion F-16 sale to the Philippines.
And now we're going to look at Indonesia's growing role on international stage. From President Prabowo's diplomatic mission across the Middle East to discussions at home on how the country can position itself as a global food barn. Plus, a closer look at how Bali is stepping up efforts to protect its culture, its tourism rebounds. All that and more coming up on Your World.
Ibu Wamen PU dan Kepala BPS.
Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs, Airlangga Hartarto, says the meeting with business associations on Monday discussed export strategies and the impact of the new U.S. tariffs on the labor-intensive sector in Indonesia. Airlangga informs that the government is also preparing strategic steps to deal with the European market, which is the third largest export destination after China and the US. The new tariffs is expected to affect a number of labor-intensive industrial sectors. The apparel and footwear industries are among the most vulnerable to global market fluctuations. Airlangga says further that Indonesia will not retaliate against the 32% trade tariff announced by President Trump last week. Instead, Indonesia chooses to take diplomacy and negotiations to maintain long-term relations and the investment climate. Airlangga also says that President Prabowo Subianto has instructed his aide to send an official letter to the US before April 9 as a diplomatic response to the new tariff policy.
President Prabowo Subianto said that Indonesia could become global food barn if the policy continued to take the farmer's side. During the Grand Harvest event in Majalengka, he explained that the goal not only focuses on people's welfare, but also to allow Indonesia in assisting other countries in need. Several governors from various regions such as Aceh, West Sumatra, Central Java, South Sulawesi, West Nusa Tenggara or NTB, and Lampung expressed their appreciation on the agricultural policies which are considered able to improve productivity. The policies included the decision on whole grain price at 6,500 rupiah per kilogram, the direct distribution of fertilizers to farmers, and the provision of agricultural machines, all of which had reportedly resulted in positive impacts. For example, South Sulawesi recorded a harvest of 1,992 tons of whole grain in first quarter of 2025, a figure that was previously achieved in a year. Meanwhile, West Nusa Tenggara recorded 900,000 tons of whole grain in the first 3 months of 2025. The President welcomed the report and expressed commitment to expand the intervention to other regions. He also recorded the challenges that the governors conveyed to be the basis of policy evaluation in the future and to establish equal agricultural productivity across Indonesia.
President Prabowo Subianto flew from Halim Perdana Kusuma Air Force Base in Jakarta on Wednesday early morning to visit 5 countries in the Middle East, namely United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, and Jordan. The goal of this visit was to provide insights to Middle Eastern countries regarding conflict resolution in Gaza, Palestine. A number of top officials also accompanied the president, namely Vice President Gibran Rakabuming Raka and Military Commander General Agus Subianto. Prabowo told the press that Middle Eastern countries asked Indonesia to be more proactive in helping them to find comprehensive solutions for the ongoing conflict in Gaza.
Saya lakukan ini karena banyak permintaan terhadap Indonesia untuk lebih aktif lagi berperan untuk mendukung mencari penyelesaian konflik di Gaza dan di Timur Tengah secara keseluruhan.
President Prabowo would arrive in Abu Dhabi, United Emirates Arab, on his first schedule to meet with the UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan to discuss geopolitics and geo-economic situation.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
President Prabowo Subianto began his official trip to 5 Middle East countries this week to give insights on conflict resolution in the region. Prior to his departure to the Middle East on Wednesday early morning, President Prabowo Subianto told the press that Indonesia, as a Muslim-majority country, played an important role to help Middle Eastern countries in finding resolutions to the ongoing conflicts in Gaza and other places in the region. Prabowo said the Middle East saw Indonesia as a non-bloc leader, which is free and active in bridging the conflicting parties to find a solution. Indonesia is always to be involved in conflict resolution, according to its capacity and ability, he said.
Indonesia dianggap bisa diterima oleh banyak pihak, bisa diterima oleh semua pihak yang bertikai. Saya kira posisi ini membuat kita memang memiliki tanggung jawab. Karena itu saya sampaikan bahwa Indonesia siap bila diminta oleh semua pihak yang terlibat untuk berperan. Kami siap berperan sesuai dengan kapasitas dan kemampuan Indonesia. Selamat pagi.
President Prabowo would arrive in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, on his first schedule to meet with UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan to discuss geopolitics and geo-economic situation. Afterwards, Prabowo would fly to Turkey to meet with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Prabowo said the visit to Turkey was a follow-up on President Erdogan's visit to Indonesia recently. On Saturday, President Prabowo is scheduled to fly to Egypt and Qatar. In Qatar, the president would conclude and sign a strategic agreement between Qatar and Indonesia. The last leg of the trip would be Jordan, where President Prabowo is expected to meet with King of Jordan, Abdullah II.
President Director of InJourney Destination Management, Febrina Intan, said in Yogyakarta on Monday, 182,219 tourists visited Borobudur Temple, Prambanan Temple, and Keraton Ratu Boko from March 31st to April 6th. This number shows a 25% increase compared to Eid holiday last year. In details, a total of 108,784 tourists visited Prambanan Temple. 67,536 tourists visited Borobudur Temple, and 5,899 tourists visited Keraton Ratu Boko. The peak of visits across these three temples occurred on Thursday, April 3rd, the third day after Eid, with 40,015 tourists. In details, 23,753 tourists visited Prambanan Temple, 15,211 tourists visited Borobudur Temple, and 1,051 tourists visited Kraton Ratu Boko. Meanwhile, the Prambanan Ramayana Theatre and performance recorded its peak number of visitors on Sunday, with 740 tourists.
Bali Governor Wayan Koster issued Circular Letter Number 7 Year 2025 on the obligations, prohibition, and sanctions for international tourists. The newly issued circular was an update from a similar circular issued in 2023. Wayan Koster updated the circular because there have been new dynamics when he was not in the office. The new circular stipulates that international tourists should honor the sanctity of temples, statues, and other sacred religious symbols. Bali administration also requires the tourists to wear modest and proper outfits, especially when visiting sacred sites, tourism attractions, public spaces, and while doing activities in Bali. The international tourists should pay a tariff of 150,000 rupiah, or around $9 before departure or during their stay in Bali. Upon arrival in Bali, they must be accompanied by licensed tourist guides who understand the condition of nature, tradition, and local wisdom of Balinese communities. To implement these rules, the administration involves the people and asks them to report the violating tourists to 081 287 590 999 for further legal actions. In this segment, we highlight significant cultural environmental development from around the world. From Indonesia's collaborative efforts with China to restore vital mangrove ecosystems, to Turkey's restoration of its UNESCO World Heritage Sites, we'll look at how heritage and sustainability go hand in hand. Now let's take a closer look.
The latest episode of CGTN's Catching a Wave 2, released on March 28, highlights China and Indonesia's collaborative efforts to restore coastal ecosystems through a mangrove rehabilitation project in Banten. Led by China's CHN Energy and Indonesia's National Electricity Company, the project transformed degraded land into a thriving habitat, providing natural protection against erosion and supporting local wildlife. The episode titled Guardians of the Coast also ties into the broader theme of China's role in promoting stability and environmental initiatives in the South China Sea. Experts featured in the documentary emphasized the importance of blending traditional and modern techniques, scientific research, and community involvement. The restoration efforts in Bursa's historic Hans district continue to reveal the city's rich heritage. Initiated in 2020, the Karsibasi Urban Design Project has led to the demolition of 63 structures that disrupted the area's historic silhouette, including derelict buildings. This initiative has revitalized the district, bringing its historical essence to light. The Hans district, recognized on the UNESCO World Heritage List since 2014, has undergone significant transformations under this project. A 19,000 square meter area encompassing landmarks such as Piring Han, Ipek Han, and Bakir Shilar Karsisi has been rejuvenated. In Wyndham, Western Australia, ancient indigenous stories are being preserved through giant puppet shows, with community elders, rangers, and puppeteers working together. A story about the Unggut, The rainbow serpent who created rivers is brought to life using handmade puppets crafted from simple materials. The project also highlights the rangers' efforts to protect the land for future generations. This initiative not only empowers youth, but also helps ensure the stories and traditions are passed down, keeping culture and country alive through art and performance. Pope Francis was seen making a joyful and unexpected public appearance at the end of the Mass, marking the conclusion of the Jubilee of the Sick and Healthcare Workers, during which St. Peter's Holy Door was crossed by him. His discharge from Rome's Gemelli Hospital took place on Sunday, March the 23rd, after over a month of hospitalization caused by a bilateral polymicrobial pneumonia that had endangered his life during 2 critical episodes. Although he was allowed to return to his residence at Casa Santa Marta, full recovery has not yet been achieved. Treatment is still being administered, including respiratory and motor physiotherapy. Oxygen is being provided during the day, while high-flow oxygen with nasal cannulus is used at night as needed.
Fish banquets are among the most interesting Heilongjiang cuisines. From roast saucefish to soy sauce eel, this fishbowl feast features delicacies conceived by the Hezhou people, an ethnic minority group in the region. Among them, the most precious one is this fish species with a triangular mouth and tentacles on the bottom. Generally inhabiting the waters of Heilongjiang River with a size of up to 5 or 6 meters long and a weight of thousands of catses, this giant pandafish is also touted as a freshwater king of fish. Why?
它这个浑身都是宝。
Mr. Chen of Harbin Catering Management said, "The creature is chock full of treasures. Every part of it is scrumptious." The giant pandafish in the wild is now a national protected animal and cannot be caught or eaten casually. The one they're serving now is taken from a breeding base. Such fish can be cooked in 68 different ways.
最近哈尔滨最流行的。
Chen said recently the most popular dish of the fish is the sweet and sour giant pandafish. The meat is charred on the outside but tender inside. What is the difference between fish from the northeast and from the south?
我们叫寒地鱼啊，也就冷水。
We call it a cold water fish because the weather in the country's 3 northeastern provinces is cold. The fish is constantly swimming in the water, so its meat will be firmer than the southern counterpart.
And that wraps up this week edition of Your World. I am Aisha Fabian. See you again next week, and thank you for watching.